They laughed when the struggling mechanic stepped out of his rusty pickup 5 minutes later. The billionaire jet owner asked him to marry her right on the tarmac. No one believed the man in grease-stained clothes could even touch the aircraft, let alone save it from a mid-air explosion. But when the engine roared back to life, the laughter died, and she walked straight up to him and said, "If I proposed to you right now, what would you say?" Before we dive into this unbelievable story, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you love stories about unexpected love and life-changing moments, hit that subscribe button. We've got another jaw-dropping story coming your way tomorrow. Let's get started. They said he didn't belong there. When a dusty, battered pickup truck rolled to a stop beside a private jet at Marlowe Executive Airfield in Texas, no one looked twice until the door swung open and Ethan Miller, a grease-covered mechanic in his 50s, stepped out. He was called to fix a billionaire's jet, an emergency, but the moment he emerged, the suits behind the glass burst into laughter. A man like that fixing a jet like this impossible? Except one person didn't laugh. Amelia Westwood, the jet's striking owner and CEO of Westwood Aerospace, watched silently from the terminal window. Something about the man caught her eye. Maybe it was the way he walked calm, deliberate. Maybe it was the absence of pretense. As Ethan's boots hit the tarmac, the sun was just rising over the Texas hills. The wind tugged at his flannel shirt. He had no team, no clipboard, no fancy tools, just a wrench, calloused hands, and a sense of duty. What no one knew was this: the jet was seconds from disaster, and in less than 5 minutes, the mechanic everyone laughed at would not only save it but be asked the most unexpected question of his life. What happened next shocked everyone. Ethan didn't speak to anyone. He didn't need to. He dropped his old leather tool bag beside the jet, opened the engine panel, and froze. His breath caught. What he saw was beyond neglect. It was a time bomb. The fuel line wasn't just cracked, it was melted. The insulation was gone. A thin trail of fuel had already started leaking toward the ignition coil. One spark, one flicker of power, and this sleek jet would have turned into a fireball mid-air. He muttered under his breath, "Who the hell signed off on this?" There was no time for rage, no time to call for backup, no time to explain. So, Ethan rolled up his sleeves and went to work. Inside the terminal, Amelia watched in silence. Her staff scoffed, still joking, but she wasn't laughing. She'd flown, designed, even raced jets. She knew what she was seeing, and it wasn't comedy. It was precision. It was instinct. Ethan's fingers moved like they'd done this 1,000 times. He wasn't guessing, he was diagnosing, repairing, saving. A few airport workers stopped to film him. Some laughed, others whispered, but Ethan didn't flinch. He was in a world of wires, pressure valves, fuel seals. He wiped sweat off his brow with his sleeve and tightened the last clamp. Then, without ceremony, he closed the engine panel. For a moment, nothing. Then, a hum. Soft at first, then steady. The jet's systems flickered, then glowed. It was alive again. Behind the glass, the suits went silent. One leaned forward, eyes wide. That should have taken hours. Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He slung the tool bag over his shoulder, dusted his hands on an old rag, and turned to leave. That's when it happened. The jet's door opened with a mechanical hiss. The steps unfolded like a royal invitation. And down walked Amelia Heels, clicking with power and grace. But her face was unreadable. She walked past every engineer, every executive in auto, every technician who doubted him, straight toward the man who saved her aircraft. "You fixed it," she said. Ethan blinked, voice low. "Yes, ma'am." "No, you saved it. My pilot told me this jet needed grounding for a week. You fixed it in 5 minutes." He nodded. "The fuel line was melted. almost reached ignition. You could have walked away. I don't walk away from fire hazards. A pause. Then, she smiled. Not the boardroom smile, not the rehearsed grin for investors. A real one. And then she said the one sentence that made time freeze for everyone within earshot. "What would you do?" she asked softly. "If someone like me asked you something completely insane." Ethan furrowed his brow. "Depends how insane." She took one step closer. "What if I asked you to marry me?" Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't ask if it was a joke. Instead, he looked straight at her, this poised billionaire in a custom-tailored suit, asking him, a grease-covered stranger. A question that shattered every expectation. Why, he asked, his voice low, steady. Amelia's gaze didn't waver. "Because you're the only person who didn't try to impress me today. You just showed up and saved everything." Ethan shifted his weight. He looked down at his hands blackened with oil. Rough from years of wrench turns and late-night repairs. "You don't even know me." "That's why I'm asking," she whispered. The air between them was electric. The others inside pressed against the glass, mouths open. Phones were already recording, streaming, speculating. "I've been proposed to 22 times," she added with a bitter smile. "Men in suits, with charts, and net worths memorized. They wanted my legacy. You wanted nothing. And that's why I want this." Behind them, the jet gleamed in the rising sun, its systems humming softly like a second heartbeat. "You want to marry a mechanic?" Ethan asked. Not sarcastic, just tired from too many years of being underestimated. Amelia stepped forward. "No. I want to marry the only man who didn't care who I was until I stood in front of him with nothing but a busted jet." Still, Ethan hesitated. Then he said, "Take off your shoes." She blinked. "What?" "If you're serious," he said, eyes locked onto hers. "Take off your shoes. Come walk with me. No cameras, no headlines. Just 5 minutes." Without a word, Amelia reached down and slipped off her heels, barefoot on sun-warmed concrete. She followed him past the jet, past the terminal, past the curious stairs. They walked in silence toward the old side of the airfield, where forgotten hangars stood like rusted monuments. Ethan stopped at a weather-worn door and pushed it open. Inside, there was no glamour, no machines, just a simple folding chair, a chipped table, and dusty walls covered with black and white photos planes. Wrenches, and one small boy in overalls standing beside a man who looked just like Ethan. Only older, smiling wide. "My father fixed engines people gave up on," Ethan said. "This was his place. I kept it going." Amelia looked around, taking it all in. "You live in a world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals," Ethan continued. "I live on grit, midnight repairs, and meals on toolboxes. If you're really asking, then don't expect champagne. Expect scraped knuckles and black coffee." She looked at him. Really looked. And then she smiled. "That sounds perfect." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the stained glass panels of the old hangar, casting golden patches across the floor. Amelia Westwood sat cross-legged on the cold concrete, barefoot. Her designer dress neatly folded beside her. She wore Ethan's oversized flannel shirt and held a chipped ceramic mug filled with strong black coffee. No makeup, no meetings, no security detail, just silence and peace. Across from her, Ethan was fixing a rusted throttle cable on an old Cessna. He didn't speak, didn't glance up. But the comfort in the silence between them was more profound than any conversation she'd had in years. "You really stayed," he said finally, not as a question, but with quiet disbelief. "I said I would," she replied. "You could have called a driver, found the nearest 5-star suite." "I already know what 5 stars feel like," she said with a soft smile. "I wanted to know what with you feels like." He let out a low chuckle. It's loud, smells like grease, starts with cold feet and burnt coffee. She raised her mug in a mock toast. To cold feet. But outside their little world, the chaos had begun. Media vans swarmed outside Westwood Aerospace headquarters. Her jet had missed its scheduled flight. News anchors speculated everything from illness to scandal. Security footage of her barefoot, walking alongside a mechanic, leaked to the press. Her name began trending globally. In a boardroom filled with panic, Matthew Rhodes, her longtime COO and polished advisor, paced furiously. This is madness. Investors are calling non-stop. Journalists are camped outside. We have a legacy to uphold. A younger executive hesitated, then asked, "What if she's choosing happiness?" Matthew scoffed. "She's a Westwood. Westwoods don't chase feelings. We build empires." At the end of the table, Evelyn, Amelia's godmother and former co-founder of the company, said nothing. But she remembered. She remembered a young Amelia crying in marble hallways, blowing out birthday candles alone, rehearsing smiles for interviews. And now, finally, Amelia was off script. Back in the hangar, Ethan looked up as a sleek black SUV pulled into view near the chain-link gate. He stiffened. Amelia stood. She knew who it was even before the door opened. Matthew stepped out with all the confidence of a man who expected to be obeyed. "Miss Westwood," he said, nodding with corporate politeness. "It's time to return. The board is in chaos. The media storm is growing. You've made your point. Now let's get back to reality." Amelia wiped her hands on a shop towel and smiled faintly. "You mean your version of reality?" He glanced at Ethan with barely concealed contempt. "Who is he?" "The man who kept your jet from exploding." Matthew narrowed his eyes. "Do you really think this qualifies him to stand next to you?" Amelia stepped forward, calm and unwavering. "I don't need qualifications to choose who I stand beside." Matthew tried to speak, but Amelia held up a hand, calm but firm. "For years, I've followed every projection, attended every summit, signed every deal, but none of that prepared me for what I felt yesterday. When a man I'd never met looked at a burning problem and just fixed it without a title, without fanfare, without permission." She turned back to Ethan. "Come with me." Ethan blinked. "Where?" "To show the world I'm not ashamed of the one person who saw me before the brand." He hesitated only for a second. Then he nodded. Amelia reached for his hand, and this time, Ethan took it. Without a word. They stepped out of the hangar. The sunlight outside was harsh, cameras already flashing like firecrackers, microphones thrust forward. But she didn't flinch. No makeup, no diamonds. Just truth. The reporters were stunned silent for a moment before chaos erupted. "Ms. Westwood, who is he? Is this your new partner? Did you cancel your board meeting for this?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The world had seen her in tailored gowns, polished speeches, pristine press releases. But today, they saw something raw, real. A billionaire walking hand in hand with a mechanic, both stained with oil, both calm as if the storm didn't matter. Inside a blacked-out vehicle across the street, Matthew sat, jaw tight, fingers tapping the steering wheel. He'd spent over a decade crafting Amelia's image, advising her on every move, polishing every word. Now, she was writing her own story. Earlier, when they'd spoken on the phone, he'd warned her, "Don't throw away your future for some grease monkey. Think about your legacy." She hadn't answered then, but her silence was answer enough. Back in the sky, a jet soared overhead. For a second, Amelia looked up, eyes reflecting the infinite blue above them. "I spent my life building a future I never asked for," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "And I'm done pretending." Ethan glanced sideways at her. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," she replied. They walked together across the open tarmac toward the waiting aircraft. The same jet he saved, but this time it wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. A vessel to anywhere they chose without an itinerary written by someone else. The cameras followed them. The questions flew, but none of that reached them. In that moment, Amelia Westwood wasn't the CEO. She wasn't the brand. She was a woman choosing to live her own story. Finally. And the man walking beside her didn't need a resume. He had already proven everything that mattered with one wrench, one heartbeat, and one act of quiet courage. The hum of the jet was steady as Amelia and Ethan ascended the steps. The hatch closed behind them with a soft thud, like the punctuation mark on the end of a long, unfinished sentence. Inside, the cabin was quiet, luxurious. Yes, but suddenly, all the opulence felt irrelevant. Amelia didn't head to the usual executive seat. She paused halfway down the aisle, kicked off her shoes again, and turned to Ethan. "This jet has seen world leaders. Tech giants, celebrities," she said with a smirk. "But right now, it just needs to carry two people who stopped pretending." Ethan smiled faintly. "You always talk like that. Only since yesterday." He chuckled, lowering into the seat across from her. "You really changed overnight." Amelia tilted her head. "Maybe not. Maybe I just woke up." There was a silence not empty, but full of realization, of breath, of the rare kind of peace that doesn't come from achieving, but from releasing. Outside the window, news vans scrambled, pundits speculated. Social feeds buzzed with everything from admiration to outrage. "She's lost her mind," one anchor claimed. "A billionaire abandoning her empire for a mechanic." But Amelia didn't hear it. She was looking at Ethan, watching how he wiped his hands clean before touching anything. Still gentle, still careful, still real. "You know," she said, voice softer, "I thought I knew love. I thought it looked like candlelit boardrooms and diamond-studded lies. But now, I think it might look more like this, like chipped mugs and old hangers and honesty." Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a photo worn at the corners, creased in the middle. It was of him as a boy, standing beside his father, both grinning in front of an old biplane. "He never had much," Ethan said. "But he taught me to build, fix, and never take shortcuts, not with engines, not with people." Amelia looked at the photo for a long time. "You're your father's legacy. And maybe you're not your company's—" She blinked, caught off guard by how true it felt. "I used to measure my worth by headlines," she admitted. "Now I measure it by how free I feel. And I feel free with you." He looked at her, then at the window, where the horizon stretched wide and golden. "No one's ever said that to me," he said. "Well," she smiled, "get used to it." The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Where to, Ms. Westwood?" She paused, then looked at Ethan. He answered for them both. "Anywhere that's ours." And in that instant, their paths once so different merged into something neither of them saw coming. Not status, not fame, not legacy, but truth, and a future they'd build together, one repair at a time. The jet soared above the clouds, carving a silver path through the morning sky. Below them, the world buzzed with opinions, headlines, and noise, but in the cabin, it was quiet, calm, as if the storm had passed and all that remained was the stillness that follows truth. Amelia leaned her head against the window, watching the sun climb higher. "It's strange," she said. "I've flown 100 times more, but this is the first time I don't feel like I'm running from something." Ethan, sitting across from her, sipped his coffee from that same chipped mug. "Maybe that's because you're finally flying toward something." She smiled. Not the smile she wore in press conferences or investor meetings. This one was softer, more personal, the kind that comes after letting go. Back on the ground, media outlets scrambled to explain what had just happened. Amelia Westwood defies expectations. CEO walks away from legacy for love. Mystery mechanic wins billionaire's heart. But none of it really captured what had unfolded because what they saw was just the surface. They missed the truth. They missed the woman who had spent decades following the path others paved for her. They missed the man who had lived quietly in the shadows, fixing what others broke. And they missed the moment when two lives collided not with fireworks, but with understanding. Later that day, Amelia posted a single message on her personal channel. No PR edits, no filters. It read, "He didn't save my jet. He saved my life from autopilot." The comment section exploded. Some praised her courage, others criticized her recklessness. But the most liked response was simple. She didn't fall in love with a mechanic. She rose into love with someone real. Meanwhile, far from the chatter, Amelia and Ethan landed in a quiet coastal town. No media, no grand announcements, just two people walking hand in hand down a pier, barefoot again, sea breeze in their hair. They didn't talk about what would come next marriage, business, headlines. They talked about little things, dreams, regrets, recipes. The sound an old engine makes right before it dies. And somewhere in that simplicity, they found something rare clarity. They knew storms would come. The world wouldn't forget who she was, but neither of them cared. Because the greatest stories aren't written in newspapers or played out in boardrooms. They're lived raw, unfiltered, unplanned, and this was theirs. This. Ethan stopped at the edge of the dock, turned to Amelia, and whispered, "So, what's next?" She looked out at the endless blue and said, "Whatever we build together." And with that, they stepped forward into a future not defined by legacy or wealth, but by choice. The kind of choice that changes everything. Sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary places: a hangar, a repair job, a quiet act of integrity. Ethan didn't show up to be noticed. He showed up to do what was right. And that silent courage, that quiet truth, is what made Amelia stop. And see, love doesn't always arrive with flowers or fireworks. Sometimes, it shows up in worn-out boots, carrying a wrench and saves everything you thought you had under control. Have you ever made a choice that went against what everyone expected but felt completely right? If so, I'd love to hear your story. Tell us in the comments what's one decision you made for yourself, not for others. And if this story reminded you of someone, share it with them. Because sometimes, all it takes is one quiet moment to change everything. Don't forget to subscribe if you believe it's never too late to rewrite your own story. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another tale that proves life doesn't stop surprising us.